Outburst, a Todd Mills mystery. Book 4. Author, R.D. Zimmerman. Publisher, Scribble Pub. Minneapolis, Minnesota, 1998. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 19. Ignoring this morning's newspaper, Todd sipped his second cup of coffee and stared out at the lake. What if Todd hadn't seen that guy in the bushes and hadn't called out? What if the gunman hadn't missed? What if he tried again to kill Rollins? Yes, that had been him last night, the very same guy who'd gunned down Mark Forrest and later telephoned Todd. There was no definitive proof, at least not yet, but Todd was completely sure of it, and now burdened as much by a pile of guilt as a lack of sleep. Todd could barely move. He'd done his damnedest to engage this killer, and in retaliation, the killer was evidently doing his damnedest to live up to his threat, and while Todd hadn't understood before, he certainly did now. Yes, go after his lover. That was exactly how to make him suffer. Dear God, thought Todd, leaning his face into the palms of both hands, if anything happens to Rollins, particularly because of the stupid-ass things I've done, I won't be able to handle it. It had been a late night, and as much as Todd had just wanted to wrap his arms around Rollins and whisk him out of there, he'd known that Rollins was right, that he had to do it all officially. But rather than leaving as Rollins had wanted, after all, Todd shouldn't have been there in the first place. Todd retreated to his car and waited. Rollins had called in the shooting right away, and it got big attention real quick. The murder of police officer Mark Forrest weighed heavy on every cop in town, and within minutes a half-dozen police cars had come screaming into the neighborhood. Wasting no time, they searched every yard, cruised every alley, yet discovered nothing but some kids smoking cigarettes in an abandoned garage. Meanwhile, the guys in car 21, the team from the Bureau of Investigation, arrived and began combing Rollins' backyard in hopes of finding the stray bullet that had been meant for Rollins. They used huge flashlights to search everything. The ground, the side of the neighbor's house, the trees, all to no avail. Even the bullet casing, which they'd hoped would tie into the Forrest case, escaped them. It was going on 3 a.m. before things quieted down, before Todd was able to get Rollins aside. No, Todd had insisted Rollins wasn't spending the night there, least of all by himself. There was some crazy-ass son of a bitch out and about, and Todd wasn't going to leave Rollins alone in the end. They blew off Lieutenant Holbrook's orders and ended up back at Todd's condo, their fear morphing into sex that was as full of desperation as it was passion. So what did they get in the end? 3-4 hours sleep? Wondering if the police had dug up anything new on the case. He was just opening the paper when the phone rang. He reached past his coffee and grabbed the cordless. Please, he thought, let it be Rollins. Letting him walk out of here hadn't been easy, not by any means. Hello, said Todd. It's Wah? It seemed as if they hadn't spoken last night, but days ago. And Todd said, Hi, Jeff. What's up? Did you find out anything? A bit. He kept his voice low. Listen, I'm at work, so I can't talk long. But I called one of the bartenders last night, and he said, sure, he remembered Mark Forrest. Apparently, a lot of the guys down there knew of him, because last winter, Forrest was the cover boy for a feature Q Monthly did on gay cops. You're kidding. I must have missed that issue, said Todd, making a mental note to dig up that issue. I guess, besides being a cop, he was quite the looker. Yeah, he was. Well, he was there at the gay times. Suddenly, Todd was very awake, more than he had been yet that morning, and he pressed, When? In the last few days? That's where the bartender gets a little fuzzy. He's a sweetheart, but he's certainly no rocket scientist. I'll tell you that much. He did one too many chemicals, I do believe. Anyway, He's not positive, but he's pretty sure Mark Forrest was in a day or two before he was killed. Then again, it could have been last week. Was he alone? No, not this last time, or so says my bartender friend. Forrest usually came in by himself, he said it, but the last time, he was with some guy. He's sure of that because there was kind of a scene. There was a bachelorette party, about a half dozen women. Then they started giggling and laughing because Forrest and this guy were making out in the next booth. Apparently, Forrest's friend got all bent out of shape and... This guy, what did he look like? Demanded Todd. I asked. Trust me, I did. But all I got was that the guy had brown hair. Nothing else? Zip! A pulse of excitement rushed through Todd. It very well might have been him, this guy who'd gunned down Forrest, but even if it weren't, perhaps he knew something about Mark Forrest's last few days. Todd asked, Would your friend be willing to talk to me? Maybe, but then again, you are a reporter, and I bet he wouldn't want to do anything on TV. I just want to talk, that's all. Well, Jeff thought a moment. Well, if you came down when I was there, say like tonight or tomorrow night, I could introduce you, but Toddy, dear, don't get your hopes up. I think I got all there was to get. Jeff, thanks. Thanks a million. I'll be in touch. Todd hung up, then jumped to his feet. He took a quick slug of coffee, next stood at the balcony door, overlooking the lake. This wasn't much, but at least it was something. A foothold into Mark Forrest's personal life. So, who was this guy that Mark Forrest had been kissing? Had they just picked each other up? Or was this someone Forrest had known for a while? Perhaps someone he'd even brought home? Now, there's an ideal thought, Todd. He turned and half-trotted across the living room. Reaching the front hall, he grabbed his briefcase, brought it back to the dining room, and, giving it a good shake, dumped it out on the table. Pens and paper, clips, and scraps of paper spewed out, and there it was, Mark Forrest's address, which Todd had scribbled down just after they'd found his body in the Mississippi. Should he go? Absolutely. Barely 30 minutes later, Todd was pulling down Young Avenue South to a tall, white, clapboard house with a front porch, one of thousands like it built in the Twin Cities in the early part of the century. Todd checked the address on the scrap of paper one last time, and then climbed out. As he turned from the sidewalk to the front walk, he saw the pot of red geraniums at the base of the porch steps. Had Forrest planted those, or had someone else? Someone such as a relative? Todd had learned that Forrest's parents lived south of the cities, so who was he about to meet? A sister? A brother? There was only one way to find out, and Todd swung open the screen door, stepped onto the wooden porch, and pressed the doorbell. He hated this kind of cold call, but he had no choice, and he stood there, his hands clasped in front of him as footsteps bustled somewhere inside. A moment later, a lace curtain covering the window on the large oak door was pushed aside, and an older woman peered out, her white hair short and curled. Yes, she said through the glass. The best way was to be terribly upfront, and he took a deep breath and said, I was wondering if I could speak to you for a few minutes about Mark Forrest. I've already talked to the police. I've already told them everything I know. Her brow crinkled in suspicion. Who are you, anyway? Sir Rollins had been here yesterday afternoon. Either he'd come out here or had sent someone else. Was this then a waste of time? My name is Todd Mills. I'm from WLAK-TV, he said. Oh! Evidently, Todd needed no further introduction. Too Midwestern to simply slough him off. She unlocked the door and pulled it open, her eyes running over him, and as she sized him up, Todd steadied her as well. No, he realized with a sense of relief, this wasn't a family member. This woman, short with pale skin and plain glasses and wearing blue pants and a white blouse, was sullen, even visibly sad, but her eyes weren't red or watery. Sure, I recognize you. You're on Channel 10, she said, her voice direct and even. I'm Anna Johnson. I was Mark's landlady. He lived here in this house. Sure, he rented my apartment. Todd glanced over his shoulder, saw the oak staircase, another predominant feature of these homes. You have an apartment here in the house? Oh, yes, up on the third floor. There's a staircase out back. It's not a big apartment, but it's nice and clean. Mark, bless him, moved in almost a year ago. Nice fella. Did all my shoveling last winter and did a real good job, too. She paused and said, I've been wondering if any of you reporters would come around. I'm the first, Todd casually asked, quite curious to know if the competition had been around. Yeah. She peered past him toward the street. Say, I don't want any cameras snooping around my house, okay? Don't worry. I'm here by myself. I'm just trying to understand what happened. It's just awful, isn't it? She said, raising one hand to her chin and shaking her head. Nice kid like him. A police officer, too. I was so happy to have him living here, to have a cop living in my house. And here he gets himself killed. Yeah, it's terrible. Todd hesitated, wondered if she knew Mark was gay. Could you tell me if any guys used to come around? You know, if Mark had any particularly close male friends? Like a boyfriend. That's what the police asked too. And I told them no. Not that I ever saw. Oh, I knew Mark was gay, but I didn't give a bit about that. All that I cared was that he took good care of the apartment, which he certainly did. He was a nice, quiet fellow. So you don't remember any guys visiting Mark? No, not any that come into mind. You see, it's small up there, real small. A room with a bed and a kitchenette and a bath. That's it, not much. Room for entertainment, really. But it's cheap, and Mark took it because he said he was saving up to buy a house. That's what he wanted to do, buy his own place. Of course, already sensing this was going to be a bust, Todd asked, So you don't remember anyone coming around? You never heard anybody else up there, particularly not in the last few weeks? No, not at all, and I would have heard it too. You have to understand, this place is built as tight as a drum. And there's a wood floor up there, all maple, and I would have heard if he'd had anyone with him, but he never did. All I ever heard was just one set of footsteps. You see, said Todd, quite certain that she had in fact been listening. He asked her for a handful of other questions. Was he on time with his rent? Was he recently gone more than usual? None of which shed any light. Then, as discouraged as he was desperate, Todd thanked her and slowly made his way down the front walk and back to his vehicle. Okay, he pondered. Now what? As he passed around the front of his Cherokee, he looked up and saw a white piece of paper pinned between the windshield and the wiper blade. He immediately scanned the street up and down, but saw not a single car speeding off. He then searched the yards on both sides of the block. No one, not even a dog. Weird, he thought. He'd been standing right up on that porch, right on Anna Johnson's threshold, and he hadn't heard or noticed a thing out here, his heart filling with dread. Todd reached for the paper, which was folded in half, but rather than announcing a neighborhood meeting or a garage sale, as Todd so hoped, there was one simple, typed line that read, Don't forget, asshole, he's still the bait for a trap that you set. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.